One thing to escape from prison, but what they did on that night, they crossed a line they shouldn't have ever crossed.
For lawmen all across the country, the death of a brother officer made the hunt personal. Everyone knew they had to find the Texas-7 before they killed again.
This TLC program is sponsored in part by On a Disney Cruise Line Vacation. You're the director of your...
The Texas-7 robbed a sporting goods store in Irving, Texas, and ruthlessly gunned down a police officer. Now, federal law enforcement agencies joined in on a nationwide manhunt to catch these cold-blooded killers.
This was a top priority for the FBI. And there were lots of extra resources that were brought to bear in this case.
Some of those resources included special crime-fighting software that kept track of thousands of leads that poured into the Texas-7 Task Force Command Center in Huntsville. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, more than 24 federal and state investigators worked shoulder to shoulder with one goal: to find and capture the Texas-7.
After Christmas Eve, you know, every law enforcement officer in the country wanted to catch these guys.
The fugitives knew the stakes had been raised. If they were caught now, they'd face the death penalty. They drove day and night and got out of Texas fast.
They did everything differently than we assumed they would do. They stayed together, and we thought that they would separate. They went north in the middle of winter, and we certainly expected that they would go to Mexico.
The Texas-7 kept going north for 700 miles until they reached the dusty mining town of Pueblo, Colorado on Thursday, December 26, 2000. Their new home was the local Motel 6, where George Rivas plotted their next move.
I'm sure he was like a god in their eyes because he got them out of the penitentiary without any of them being hurt.
Rivas announced that the group would have to split up so they wouldn't attract attention. Over the next few days, they sold the Suburban and bought a van, a Jeep, and a motorhome with the cash from the Oshman's robbery. On New Year's Day 2001, the 7 headed north in 2 cars. Murphy and Newberry went to Colorado Springs, while the rest of the gang drove up to the sleepy little mountain town of Woodland Park. At approximately 10 a.m., Rivas and his men arrived at the Coachlight RV Park and scoped out the grounds. Park owners Wade and Gina Holder were both in the office that morning. They'll never forget the moment they met and befriended their new tenants.
Nice to meet you. Harper introduced himself as Brother Jim, and he told me that they were traveling missionaries on their way back from California.
Wade and Gina had no reason to doubt their story.
They were well-dressed, had that southern mannerism about them. They were Christian men. We were a Christian park, and you know, I was just excited to have them in.
The supposed missionaries quickly settled into their new home in the shadow of Pikes Peak. Rivas instructed his men to be polite to their neighbors and to always carry a loaded weapon, just in case. A few days later, Murphy and Newberry paid a visit to the Coachlight RV Park. But they didn't bother pretending to be Christians.
The later 2 that came definitely were not the same as the first 5 guys. They dressed different, fatigues and stuff like that. Newberry smoked.
They were introduced to us as their mechanic and his friend. When we'd go up there, you'd see them outside tinkering with the cars or working under the hood.
And while being Christian was just a cover for the rest of the men, Larry Harper seemed to have sincere religious convictions. He joined Holder every morning to discuss the Bible over coffee.
When we were bringing up scriptures on forgiveness and stuff, it just really touched him. You know, I mean, it'd bring tears to his eyes, and we had no clue what he was working on forgiveness for.
Back at the Huntsville Command Center, the Texas-7 Task Force was inundated with leads, alleged sightings, and false alarms.
There were probably over 4,000 leads generated in this investigation. We spent a lot of time chasing a lot of ghosts.
But nobody gave up. Every police officer in the Southwest was trying to help. They had their pictures up in the police car. We had artists come in and do update drawings. We even had psychics trying to help. Everybody was trying to help.
As the authorities struggled to come up with any viable leads, the Texas 7 led a quiet life at the Coachlight RV Park, but never let down their guard.
I was surprised that this group could stay together in confined spaces for as long as they did without fighting. These are murderers, rapists, burglars, child beaters, and they're all armed to the teeth. And just one little argument amongst them could have ended in a bloodbath.
On Saturday, January 20th, a television broadcast would lead Wade Holder to a startling discovery about his new Christian friends.
A friend came to me after watching America's Most Wanted the night before and said, "I think that's the Texas 7. It was pretty incredible, but my friend was very intent that it was them. And so I said, well, let's go find some evidence.
He quickly logged on to the America's Most Wanted website.
And when I punched it in, the first picture came up was Harper, and it brought tears to my eyes. And as we scrolled, it just shocked me. I mean, every one of those guys were here. And it was just unbelievable.
At 3:30, Wade Holder burst into the Teller County Sheriff's Office and told Deputy Nick Pinnell his story. Deputy Pinnell immediately contacted Teller County Sheriff Frank Fenn, a 43-year law enforcement veteran.
The information Mr. Holder had was more than I was aware of. A birthmark, tattoos, telephone calls were made to the task force in Texas, and all that information proved correct.
The FBI, ATF, and U.S. Marshal's Office were notified that the Texas 7 might be in the area. Sheriff Fenn also asked the neighboring El Paso County, Colorado Sheriff's Department to send up their SWAT team. Holder briefed the two men on the layout of the RV park. Sheriff Fenn then drove an unmarked car to check out the location for himself. First-hand knowledge of the area would be invaluable in planning an assault on the heavily armed Texas 7. He pulled up just 50 yards away from the fugitive's trailer.
It was a tactical nightmare. It was on extreme high ground. They had ideal visibility. Everything was in their favor, not in our favor.
Back at the office, federal law enforcement agents and the El Paso County SWAT team swarmed onto the scene. Dwayne Fuselier was a supervisory special agent with 20 years in the FBI.
Once it became clear that there was a high likelihood it was these guys, the tension began to build.
Though the FBI had primary jurisdiction, the tactical commanders from each agency were equal partners in planning a course of action. El Paso County Sheriff John Anderson had 30 years in law enforcement under his belt.
We had very, very violent, vicious killers who now had significant firepower that we normally don't encounter.
They devised a two-part operation to capture the suspects. First, they would nab Larry Harper and any others who joined Wade Holder for coffee the next morning. Next, they would surround the suspect's trailer and attempt to talk the remaining members into coming out peacefully. Despite hopes for a peaceful outcome, everyone expected the worst.
We heard from the Texas authorities that they left notes that they were not going to be taken alive.
Just before dawn, on January 22nd, 2001, the assault plan was put into motion. First, a perimeter was formed around the RV park. Then, sharpshooters crept into position on top of a hill above the suspect's RV to monitor any movements. Once the park was secure, the rest of the SWAT team moved in. To avoid drawing attention, they used Sheriff Fenn's own RV, which the FBI dubbed the Trojan Horse. Several SWAT team members slipped unseen into the back of Wade Holder's office in preparation for Larry